Good Monday morning, everybody. Should be a national holiday. The Monday after the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers. I get a prediction correct for once. I was in the Chiefs post-game locker room, a lot of cigar smoke, a lot of champagne, bottles popping, a lot of music, a lot of dancing, and really quite the development here with Patrick Mahomes securing a legacy victory. He improves to 3-1 in Super Bowls. And you think about the difference between 3-1 and 2-2 when it comes to asserting yourself as, the next Tom Brady. Can you match Tom Brady? Uh, can you eclipse him when it comes to accomplishments as an NFL quarterback? And given how young he is, how much winning he's done, and now winning another MVP at another Super Bowl, I think standing there in the locker room, taking a picture of him and general manager Brett Veach throwing up the three with their fingers, it became clear to me, clear as day, if it wasn't already, that not only is he one of the greatest all time at his young age, but Mahomes, as he said, is just getting started when it comes to being paired with one of the better coaches of all time, a lot of talent on the roster, and this is probably the worst version of the Chiefs we're going to see. It certainly is the worst version of the Chiefs we've seen to this point. So I wanted to bring you my reaction from the ground here in Las Vegas on the Talking Ball with Pat Leonard podcast and live chat here on YouTube. I see Hunter Keller, a loyal fan and participant, says, "Good afternoon, Pat. Just saw Bobby Johnson staying in division." So Hunter talking about the Giants offensive line coach who was fired, actually gets hired now in Washington by Dan Quinn, who, of course, clearly has some respect for Bobby, going up against him, beating the Giants pretty badly this year, but still hires Bobby as his offensive line coach. So clearly Dan Quinn not putting all of the Giants' offensive line problems on Bobby's shoulders if he makes this hire. That's my rapid reaction to that hiring from a standpoint of, Bobby being scapegoated for not properly developing the offensive linemen in New York. Certainly you can make critical comments about the work that anybody did associated with the Giants this past season. For example, I think the way that Evan Neal ended up going to a different specialist to set differently, after his rookie season when he was doing some of those fire sets, kind of leaning, and that top heavy player that Evan Neal is wasn't benefiting him at all. So, I think there's something to be said for being critical, obviously, of work that a coach like Johnson did. But I think the personnel is the bigger issue there with the Giants offensive line. And I think bringing it back to the Super Bowl, the Chiefs offensive line was not winning their matchups against the Niners defensive front in this game. And yet they still win. Why? Well, because they have a quarterback who makes all the plays in the key moments, who doesn't make the big mistakes in the key moments. And, some insight from inside the locker room. I spoke with Brett Veach, the general manager, and I asked him, why is Mahomes' pulse so steady, and why is he so much even better in the critical moments than he would be, like, say, in the first quarter of these games? And he said that, it's basically like any great player, like when the lights are brightest, they play their best. But he said, there's an air of confidence in the Chiefs, like that when Kyle Shanahan and the Niners kicked the field goal on their first drive of overtime, they knew that we were going to go down and score and win the game. And that's exactly what Mahomes did. And, they weren't perfect, right? They had the Pacheco fumble. Mahomes threw an interception. And Nick Bolton even dropped a chance to intercept the ball early in overtime, which pretty much would have ended the game right then and there. So the Chiefs definitely missed some opportunities. But when you have a player like that, it's the ultimate eraser. And the fact is, no one in the NFL has really been able to figure this out. It's almost like, despite, let's say, a strong game plan from Kyle Shanahan and Steve Wilks, they still have to account for the next level performance of a guy like Mahomes and the fact that you can only prepare so much for it. And then you just have to sit back and watch. And really, I mean, I would say you'd have to outscore him, but the Philadelphia Eagles looked like they were doing that last year. And then Mahomes found another way to win, right? So fascinating stuff. Want to tell you guys about Bet Online, and then we'll get into some more questions. The big game is finally here. BetOnline is your number one source for playoff football odds, stats, trends, and lines with everything from point spreads to hundreds of playoff player performance props. With dozens of odds, props, and info on hundreds of sports events, politics, and entertainment, you can access the world's best wagering information anytime from desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to stay updated on all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Doug Analytics joins the chat, says, Pat, what are your thoughts on the new overtime rules? What would you have done as San Francisco winning the coin toss? Yeah, Doug, I think I would have deferred, with the new overtime rules that both teams are going to touch the ball unless one of the teams, turns it over or scores a defensive touchdown. And, I think the Niners normally defer in regulation situations. In this case, you can make a case for a couple different things. Number one, Doug, uh, you know, if you give the Chiefs the ball first and they go down and score, do you want Brock Purdy in the pressure situation of being down, driving to try to win the game and take the lead, but with the fallout of on the back end, failing in that case? Or based on what the Niners have been throughout this season, more often they're a team that gets out in front and stays out in front. And even though they lost the lead in this game and the Chiefs roared back and took the lead in the third quarter, I think the way Kyle Shanahan's thinking there is this is our identity. Our identity is to take the ball, go get points, keep our foot on the gas, and overpower them with physicality and with talent. And, I thought Purdy played pretty well. I mean, he made like a handful of plays, like 4 or 5 really, really nice plays. A lot of them involved using his legs to extend the play and then either running or throwing it out like he did to Christian McCaffrey there in overtime, getting McCaffrey up the left sideline. That was a huge play and a really, really nice play and tough play by the Niners quarterback. But Doug, I think you have to play the guy across from you, right? Like if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're not only thinking about your own game, you're thinking about the opponent. And earlier in the game, when Kyle Shanahan went for that 4th down and they got it on the pass to Kittle, and then they scored the touchdown on the pass from Purdy to Jennings, to me, that reflected that Kyle Shanahan understood we're going to need touchdowns to beat Patrick Mahomes in this game, even though we had the Chiefs' offense's number in the first half, even though it's been a low-scoring game. He knew that. And so I almost think taking the ball is one thing, but then when you come down on 4th and 4 there and you have a chance to kick the field goal in the first drive of overtime, that's also a hard one because you're playing the guy across from you. And so if the Chiefs are sitting up there in the box and GM Brett Veach is saying to himself and talking to ownership and everything, and they're like, well, if they kick a field goal here, like we're going to go down and score a touchdown and win the game. We have Patrick Mahomes. Like that's how confident they are. Obviously something else could happen. But so if you're Kyle Shanahan, do you go for that 4th down there? Like if you had it back, would you go for it? I know it's overtime. You want the points, you want the lead, but what do you do? But that's what Mahomes does. That's what this Chiefs team does. It puts you in these impossible situations. That is an impossible decision there. You think about how the Niners played the Chiefs in the last drive of regulation. They went back into a shell and were giving the Chiefs a lot underneath. And it was, I kind of looked at people near me and I said, are they giving them a field goal here? But it was also playing the guy across from you, playing Patrick Mahomes and knowing that, well, he might get a field goal, but he's going to beat us if we take a chance. But Doug, yeah, the coin toss, I think the fact that the Niners players, some of them are articulating that they were not aware of how the rules worked in that regard in overtime, and the Chiefs players are saying how prepared they were, doesn't reflect well for San Francisco. And I think, though, what it boils down to is, Mahomes and the Chiefs offense were in a position where when they had to make a big play, they were going to make it. You saw Mahomes to Kelsey down the stretch in the fourth quarter. We'll talk about the diva tight end in a minute. But yeah, Doug, I think if Kyle Shanahan could have it back, he would defer in overtime. It feels that way to me. Hunter says it makes no sense that Bobby Johnson is going to Washington. The line stinks too. But no, like I said, I mean, clearly they have a different opinion of how he can help them and develop them than the Giants do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hired him. Jim Osborne says, hi, Pat, wondering how Eric Bieniemy is feeling this morning. In what regard, Jim? You mean the fact that the Chiefs have now won without him as well, or the fact that he's kind of gotten screwed in Washington? I think you're referring to the Chiefs winning and him not being a part of it here. But, Mike Kafka had a good influence on the Chiefs, and now he's with the Giants, and the Chiefs are still winning. And Eric Bieniemy had a good influence on them, and now he's not here, and the Chiefs are still winning. I mean, the common thread is a strong defense, Steve Spagnuolo, Andy Reid, but at the center of it all is Patrick Mahomes, and that's just the bottom line. Hunter says, why is Steve Spagnuolo not running a team starting today? 4 rings as a defensive coordinator is crazy. Yeah, no doubt. While the NFL is obsessed, excuse me, with the new, young, up-and-coming offensive coach, and you can go cheaper when you hire younger coaches typically. And so that's what we're seeing, a little bit of that, both of those things. Excuse me. Been a week in Vegas, let me tell you. So, I think sometimes too, you see this with a guy like Pat Shurmur. Spagnuolo may be another example of coaches who are really good coordinators and it doesn't work out as a head coach, but that's okay. Like, you're a really good head coach. Like Wink Martindale is a good example of that right now. He's a guy who really wanted to be a head coach. He made that clear when he came to New York, etc. Got some interviews, didn't get the job. Now he's in college as a DC. Is he going to be a head coach one day? Right? He's a veteran coach. He's an older coach. Those are the things where you look at it and you say, okay, well, this was one of the dreams. Maybe it's not going to happen, and maybe it should have happened, right, for Steve Spagnuolo and all these coaches I'm talking about, like Martindale, et cetera, or even with Shurmur, he gets his chance, with the Giants. But it's okay to have a career where you're an excellent coordinator, right? And maybe that is, for lack of a better term, your ceiling, but also like your greatest value to a football team. But I do think that Steve Spagnuolo should be, his career and accomplishments, in my opinion, should be enshrined in Canton in some way, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because of all he's done from his Giants time to now this run with the Chiefs. And the fact that, to be honest, his Chiefs defense led them on this run here, right, capped by the work of him and the defense and Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes. Chris Jones with a 21% pressure rate in this game, absolutely dominant. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Jones, with his contract and what the Chiefs do there, because he's such a huge part of what they do and really wrecked the game. Purdy misses that touchdown pass to Deebo Samuel. I still think even with Jones pressuring him there, that's got to be a throw you hit. But that's just you not only do you leave him unblocked at points, but also Jones has just proven again and again that he is a premier primetime player. Chiefs offense, Hunter says, was way better with Eric. That's the crazy thing. Could just be because they had Tyreek Hill. I don't know. Yeah. Doug says, if Devin Hester can get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I think Spags is a good case. Yeah, and it's funny with coaches, though, Doug. Like, I was looking at it, there's a handful of, there's like 20-some head coaches in, but coordinators aren't like elected as coordinators typically because I think it's reserved for coaches who rise up the ranks, become head coaches, and win. And so, but you have like Bill Belichick's Super Bowl game plan against the Bills in there that's memorialized in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and displayed. And so, I think at the very least, Spagnuolo's accomplishments need to be kind of honored in some way, in that way. Maybe you could do it like for this run. I mean, Kansas City beating the Dolphins, Bills, Ravens, and Niners to win the Super Bowl. Are we kidding? Jim says George Kittle gets a lot of hype. Perhaps he's a great blocker, but can't compare him to Kelsey as an offensive force. I've never seen tight ends get open like Kelsey does. Your thoughts? No, Jim, I agree with you. I think George Kittle, an excellent run blocking tight end who became a really good receiver off of that. And also is tough as nails, right? A character player, character guy as well. But he's not the athlete that Travis Kelce is, and Kelce is basically a wide receiver in the Chiefs offense, right? Like we call him a tight end, but he's basically a wide receiver. But no, yeah, I agree. I think Kittle used to be more productive as a receiver than he is now as well. And their offense has evolved. He's gotten up there in years. Good player, but certainly not the offensive threat as a receiver that people, know him as and think of him as. I think you make a good point there. Wanted to hit on Travis Kelce for a minute. I see another question about Kadarius Toney. I will get to that and tell you guys about my experience in the locker room. And I'm going to write this for the Daily News probably tomorrow. Travis Kelce is a diva receiver, right? Like you accost your head coach on the sidelines and nearly knock him over out of frustration. Like, I agree with what AJ Brown said about like, if I did that, people would be freaking out. Like, for good reason. Like when Odell Beckham was, punching a kicking net and throwing his helmet and that kind of stuff. Like there were everybody, including myself, saying, what's going on here? This is crazy behavior. This is detrimental. It's diva stuff, like that kind of thing for anybody who, there's throw me the damn ball, Keyshawn Johnson. You could go on and on. And Travis Kelce shoves Andy Reid, nearly knocks him over, like, it was a borderline like attack on the sidelines. And CBS talks about it once, glosses over it, really doesn't come back to it. And then a lot of people covering the game and even in the post games, just, people covering the Chiefs, there just wasn't a lot of time spent on it. I thought listening to Andy Reid, it sounded like to me, he was saying, that he said something back to Kelce at some point, probably read him the riot act and told him, who reminded him who the boss was. But I just think it's so disingenuous that I know they won and the Travis and Taylor stuff and all that. Yeah, great story. But, that's not okay what Kelce did to Andy Reid. And if it was anybody else, including a guy like Kadarius Toney, people would be calling him a diva and saying he's a distraction and it's bad for the team. So, it's not fair to say that it's fine if it's just him. And you could say, oh, well, he's a productive and good player. But, like a guy like Odell Beckham was too. He was, basically the best player on the team when he was doing this stuff in New York. So, Hunter asked about, did I see Kadarius Toney last night? Yes. Said hi to him, congratulated him. He declined an interview, and basically as he was declining it, he was on Instagram Live. So doing his own thing. So bringing his message directly to the people and declining comment. That was Kadarius. But the Chiefs locker room was amazing. Like you could go to my social media on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X and see I have videos and color from inside the locker room where there was cigar smoke everywhere. They were popping champagne bottles. The Chiefs players, a couple of them mentioned how funny it was that they were celebrating in the Raiders locker room and basically say, like, hey, let's spray this champagne all over the place and muck it up because this is our division rival, like this isn't even our spot. This is a team that hates us. So that was definitely an interesting part of it. Spagnuolo was hugging Patrick Mahomes and Veach throwing up the three. Richie James with the goggles on with the champagne, as you mentioned there, Hunter, a former Giant. a guy the Giants did not bring back who proved reliable for Kansas City. And yeah, right. If a normal player had done what Travis Kelce did, they wouldn't come out of the locker room after half. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, but yeah, the atmosphere in the Chiefs locker room was one of supreme confidence that this is where they belonged and this is where they intend to be back at in future years, which is amazing. Um, Conversely, the San Francisco 49ers were absolutely devastated. I saw Mike Shanahan, the longtime storied coach and the father of Kyle Shanahan, sitting outside the locker room consoling Jawan Jennings, the wide receiver for the Niners, who nearly won a Super Bowl MVP with a touchdown pass, a touchdown catch, and running a route that drew a holding call on the Chiefs, or was it McDuffie, I think, that led to a first down, kept that drive alive for the Niners late. He really was the difference maker for the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, McCaffrey had 60 total yards and a touchdown. But Jawan Jennings, really impressive. Crazy that you have Purdy, a 7th-round pick, and Jawan Jennings, a 7th-round pick, being two of your key players in a game where you're almost winning the Super Bowl. So everybody talks about how talented the Niners are, and they are. But just remember, talent can come from anywhere. Think about Patrick Mahomes coming from Texas Tech, and people can't fit him into any kind of box during the evaluation because he's so unique. He's a unicorn. Ben McAdoo gets constant credit for being one of the few people outside Kansas City who saw it because most people didn't see it, right? So, great players come in all rounds, shapes, sizes, and the Chiefs, Brett Veach, Andy Reid, they deserve credit for surrounding Patrick Mahomes with the right players, but also recognizing, like with a Mecole Hardman, last year it was Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore catching those touchdowns. This year, those guys can't prove reliable, so they bring Mecole Hardman back, and yes, he fumbles in the playoffs, but now he's the guy who catches the winning touchdown pass in the Super Bowl, right? And it reminds you a lot of like Tom Brady, just like replace Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, these guys. I mean, good players, but it just always felt like outside of Randy Moss, it was like, oh my God, they never get Tom Brady a number one wide receiver, a star wide receiver. How are they going to win? Right. And you had Rob Gronkowski, obviously Hernandez for a little time there. But the bottom line is great quarterbacks are great quarterbacks. And most people don't have one like Mahomes. And that's why we keep seeing the same result. John Feliciano got hurt. We did not get an official update on that. Pat, the $64,000 question that Shanahan has to ask himself and his staff is how they can improve to beat Mahomes next season, because it's Mahomes that's the difference. So what to do? Yeah, Jim, I think the Niners in the first half, they had the answer, which was their pass rush winning against the Chiefs' offensive front. And so when people say the Niners' talent can overwhelm an opponent, it starts there with their defensive line, as well as their weapons on offense. But to me, if you're the Niners, Purdy didn't play the kind of football in this game that makes you say he can't do it. But there were obvious limitations on him once Spagnuolo and the Chiefs started blitzing more and getting in his face, sending the corners there, batting down passes, had several batted down in the second half and down the stretch of the game. So I think eventually you need that quarterback play to continue to elevate, especially because what will the talent continue to look like in San Fran around you? You have to continue to restock the offensive line. McCaffrey is getting up there in years, right? And it's going to be tough for San Francisco because McCaffrey he's the engine of the offense. And there's a lot of miles on those tires. And not that he's shown any signs of slowing down, but Christian McCaffrey is 27 years old. you know, for a running back, of course, that means more than the average player, right? That age. But to my point, you can't necessarily rely on your team being stacked throughout for the long term and then surviving with a quarterback who is making some plays but not changing the game as frequently as the guy across from you. Now, Purdy had an excellent year, like again, made some plays in the Super Bowl. But Jim, I think your question is a really good one. With Patrick Mahomes, even if you're the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen trying to put the team on your back, even if you're Lamar Jackson, who won MVP, even if you're Tua Tagovailoa, who ran one of the highest powered offenses in the NFL, it all comes down to you're not making the plays in the clutch, right? That Mahomes is making. And also, it comes in different ways. Like Mahomes, he was so disciplined and efficient through the playoffs. Like a lot of these playoffs was their defense doing a lot of the work. And then Mahomes and the Kansas City offense just stayed patient. And when they had an opportunity to strike, they attacked and hit touchdowns, right? Especially a lot of opening drive touchdowns. They did not do that in the Super Bowl. And then they end up pivoting and finding another way. And, I think Jim, nobody in the league knows the answer to your question, or they would have figured it out already as far as how to counter Mahomes. But certainly the way that the Niners defensive front was wrecking the game early, and even like in the last drive of regulation, I think, like Arik Armstead gets to Patrick Mahomes and brings him down with the clock, kind of dwindling, put some pressure on the Chiefs there. Like they were making some plays, and I think that pass rush sustaining itself is really the only answer we've seen throughout the recent history of the NFL. You think of the Giants beating Brady and knocking off the undefeated Patriots. You got to get to the quarterback, and you look at the other side with Spagnuolo getting to Brock Purdy late. Doug says, what do you make of Tony Romo deteriorating as a broadcaster? Doug, I think a big thing is that I think Romo sees the game really well. And so when he calls out what he thinks is going to happen, like when he predicts, I actually like that when he throws out predictions about what's coming next based on his read of the field and the, let's say, the personnel and certain motions. And, like he made a good comment yesterday about, I think the Niners spread out and empty and the Chiefs defense adjusted, and they showed man-to-man on Christian McCaffrey out wide with, I think, one of the linebackers. And then Shanahan still called timeout. And Tony Romo said right away, he goes, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you calling timeout? You had your matchup. Though I think that's good stuff. From what I heard, because I had like the headphone in listening to the broadcast as I was also watching live. So I'm sure there were some things I missed. I know there were some instances where he kind of sounded like he was rambling a little bit, but I also thought down the stretch of the game, I did think he was kind of dialed into the details. And this is something I continue to do, like some reporting on and talking to people. But, I think at a certain point, Romo was clearly told years ago to stop like telling everybody what was going to happen on the next play, every play, is my feeling, because he morphed from doing that into kind of being very general and just excited. And I know I've seen some people report that it's due to a lack of homework he's put in or the fact that he's been out of the league longer. But I don't know personally about his work ethic there. I do know, obviously, he's got the golf and, but I mean, he's paid a lot of money to do this. I find it hard to believe that Romo doesn't prepare for this, doesn't talk to people in the league. And, I don't think he was a flop yesterday from what I heard in some of the key moments, but from from my perspective, it was so Doug says his rambling on the last play was unfortunate for Nance's call. Oh, are you talking about his rambling like right at the beginning, like as they were about to snap the ball? Yeah, that was pretty weird. That was pretty weird. Yeah, I agree with that, Doug. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. About 75% of the game, Roman was pretty good, but had some goofy moments for sure. Um, yeah, no, I can't tell you guys how thrilled I am to be at this Super Bowl. This is my third straight in person. I was in Miami, but I didn't stay for the game 4 years ago. So it's really been a rewarding experience to be here. Las Vegas has done a fantastic job. It is a big events town, a larger than life town. So it's perfect for the Super Bowl. Some shout outs. The Taste of the NFL event was a phenomenal event on Saturday. Um, can't give the NFL and all of the vendors who participated and all the former players who attended enough credit. It was great to see Kyle Rudolph at that event as well, working with Gen Youth, and that was really um, a fantastic event. That it's pricey for the public, but I can tell you if you have the coin to spend on it at Super Bowl week, it is worth it. I did not make any money at the casinos. I came here for work, Doug. I came here for work. And yeah, no, it's funny. You say hopefully the Giants fix themselves and I can be in their locker room for a celebration. And I was actually thinking about that yesterday while I'm in the Chiefs locker room because the way they set it up, the post game interview rooms are in these tents outside the stadium that they're not close to the locker room. So you end up having to make a decision about where you're going to be. And I want to be in the locker room and feel what the locker room is. And if you're covering the team, right? Like I would have to hear what the head coach of the Giants had to say and the quarterback and all that at the podium, right? Because the league now handles it. It's organized that way. So I'd have to be over there and would probably miss a lot of the locker room. Now, obviously, you'd end up having a team of reporters doing that. But I was just thinking to myself, man, this would be really tough if I was covering a team right now. I mean, I would love for that to happen, have that problem. But in the logistics of how we do our jobs, it just felt like if I were one of the Chiefs writers, I'd be feeling like I needed to be everywhere all at once. And I feel like I was always missing something. But I think that one of the lasting images I have from the locker room last night is Isaiah Pacheco dancing in with the Puerto Rican flag around his neck, hanging down, draped like a cape, smoking cigars, dancing, taking pictures. I'll post some more photos on Instagram of the celebration and of kind of the scenes that were. But, Mahomes and Brett Veach throwing up their threes like this really stood out to me because it was the confidence, it was the pride that they've done it, but the lack of surprise that they've done it in their eyes, and the fact that they intend to get more all at once in one photo. And that really impressed me. Wanted to give a shout out to Benny Fowler, who did our Super Bowl prediction podcast again and again, threw out a name of a player he thought was going to be a big factor. Last year, he said it was going to be Kadarius Toney. This year, he had some different names he threw out that he thought would pop. Mecole Hardman was a guy, though, that he mentioned as somebody to keep an eye out for as like a kind of a lesser, thought of or supporting role player who could step up in the limelight and make a play. And sure enough, Mecole makes the game-winning touchdown pass there. Fantastic week here, though. The Believe Network, they had a table out on Radio Row. We did a podcast there. It was fantastic. Bron and Eric and Joe and all the guys and all the team from Believe. It was a great week. It was a great experience here. I'm excited for New Orleans next year and what we can turn that into and how this can continue to grow here. Because this Talking Ball podcast here, we're taking off. We're Giants heavy, we're Giants based, but we have a national reach, we have a national scope. We've already had guests like Sal Palantonio, Barry Sanders, Chris Candy, you name it. we're rolling through. We're going to have a huge lineup of people for the NFL draft. Hoping to get Trevor Sikkema on the program, Greg Cosell, Emery Hunt, Tony Pauline, and more. We're going to unpack what it means for the Giants with the quarterbacks in the draft. We're going to talk about league-wide trends. We're going to break some news. We're going to continue to do all of this here on the Talking Ball live chats, noon Mondays and 9 p.m. on Thursday evenings, and also on the Talking Ball podcast with Pat Leonard on the YouTube page at PL on NFL. Guys, remember we are sponsored by Bet Online and also by Estate 98 Coffee. Excuse me. Estate 98 Coffee is an Esencia de Cafe from El Salvador. It dates back to 1798. Takes 5 seconds to make an iced coffee or a hot coffee with it. Can't recommend it enough. The Super Bowl in Las Vegas, I think I would sum up this way that, well, if you're a Giants fan, one thing to learn is that, and if you're any other team's fan, one thing to learn is you got to go get a quarterback, right? There's quarterbacks and then there's QBs like Patrick Mahomes. Not that you're going to get the next Patrick Mahomes, but you got to keep searching for it. If not, you're going to end up with a new job. And from a national perspective, you have Patrick Mahomes, pushing towards Tom Brady territory if he continues on this pace. You have the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift story culminating in a championship, while Kelce also does himself no favors publicly by accosting and nearly attacking his head coach on the sideline. You have the San Francisco 49ers devastated. Like, could hear a pin drop in the locker room. Can they actually get back here? You'd think they can based on their talent. But this one's going to hurt for a while. But for me here in Las Vegas, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for you guys listening. And I can't wait for our next live chat on Thursday, our next podcast later this week, and more content to come in the New York Daily News from me. And if you don't already, subscribe to the page, subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify, and we will see you there. Jim is going to close us out here, and Hunter, I'm going to answer 2 more questions and we'll get out of here. Hunter says, have you seen the comparison of stats between the two Brady and Mahomes' first 7 years? Yes. And Mahomes is just, no one thought they would see this kind of pace again early on. Jim says, when I see the quality of the coaching at the top in these playoff teams, I really begin to wonder if Dable is up to that challenge or can put a real good staff together. He's under pressure now. Jim, I think that's a really good point. There's a very good chance the Giants will be looking for their next head coach, in 2025. A lot of pressure on Brian Dable and this new staff. And to your point, there's treading water. There's winning and proving that you belong on a certain level. And of course, this year, the Giants did neither of those things. They slid back into the league's basement, not just the conference's basement. So very disappointing. For this coming Thursday, so what would that be? The 15th. Just so you guys know, not going to do a live chat this coming Thursday on the 15th because I'm traveling, visiting some family. I'm going to take a quick break there, but we will come right back in on Monday the 19th with a noon live chat, and that will be rolling right into the franchise tag window beginning to open. More Saquon Barkley talk, more Daniel Jones and quarterback talk, more NFL draft talk leading into the NFL Combine, where we're going to be excited to talk to the GMs, talk to the coaches, see the quarterbacks throw, and work the behind the scenes. This has been Pat Leonard for the Daily News and the Believe Network on the Talking Ball with Pat Leonard podcast and live chat. Hunter, Doug, Jim, all you guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being so loyal, and I'll see you next time.